Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the SportsLine Model Show, our third live show. Let's look at the people we have today. Jake is coming in from the airport in DC, so bear with us on some audio there. And the rest of us, we're in Fort Lauderdale. We thought the whole team would be here, but we have a little weather delay from Jake. But today we have what we always have. We have some great MLB daily picks, and then we're introducing a new segment everyone should be excited about. We'll be hitting all 32 NFL teams and their win totals. We woke up and chose optimism. We're going to see what it takes for everyone to hit their overs today, starting with all of our fan favorite teams. Of course, I'm repping my Jordan Davis Eagles jersey. Best thing to happen to me was when all my Bulldogs went to Philadelphia. So with that said, we are going to jump right in to baseball today. We have Jake and John, of course, with all their great picks. If you guys want to get started.
Yeah. So as always, everybody feel free to ask as many questions as you want, put them in the chat, and Jake and I will answer them right as soon as we're done with our segment. We'll get in the chat and answer all your questions. But we're going to start with a couple of the model picks today. So we've got one model pick. Our first one's on the Reds. It's on the Reds against the Marlins. So it's Luke Weaver against Braxton Garrett. The Reds are actually 10-14 since the All-Star break, which isn't very good, but the Marlins are tied for a league worst 5-17 since the All-Star break. They're 1-11 on the road since the All-Star break, and they're 1-14 in their last 15 road games overall. 1-14 in their last 15 road games. That's absurd, especially for a team that's just outside the playoff race right now. Honestly, Luke Weaver is having all kinds of issues this year, but if there's ever a lineup to make him look good, it's the Marlins lineup. Luke Weaver actually allowed just one run in 5 1/3 innings pitched against the Marlins earlier this season. The Marlins are ranked 28th in the league in weighted on base average against righties since the All-Star break, which is a main root of their problems, while the Reds are ranked 14th against lefties in the same time span. The Reds might be without Ian Gabo tonight after pitching 2 days in a row, but the Marlins whole bullpen is gettable. They all give up runs. They really don't have anybody dominant is kind of what that means in terms of gettable. Braxton Garrett has a 5.24 ERA in his last 7 days. He has a 2.65 on the road this season, but he's only pitched on the road once since June 28th. So those numbers don't tell the whole story because this struggling stretch that he's been in, he's only had one road start, which he allowed 4 earned runs in 4 1/3 inning pitched in. So I really like the value on the Reds there.
Yeah, and the model was all over the Reds yesterday against the Marlins, which ended up hitting. We didn't have an A with a B on that, but it's still, I like the confidence in this pick as well. I like this game to go over maybe, even though the line's at 10. I think this is a game where both teams can score a lot of runs. We do have a home run prop in this game for Jazz Chisholm. He's at plus 320 to homer. We have him at plus 284 in the model. I just think this game could turn into big scoring game with this pitching matchup with Luke Weaver pitching. The Reds might have to score a lot of runs to win this game, but like you said, the Marlins bullpen is very gettable. Braxton Garrett's been gettable lately too. I like this play. I wouldn't mind like a same game parlay play, like both teams to score over 2 runs, maybe Jazz Chisholm over 1.5 bases, and the Reds to get the win there.
So when you're looking at, Steven, if you can go back, when you're looking at Jazz and his props, what are the main numbers you're looking at here, A? And B, John, you mentioned playoff contention. Is that something that the model is really taking into account, or is that something that more of just, you guys as the experts on the other end take into account?
Jake, you want to go first?
Yeah, so first I'll start with the home run props. And Jazz is homering in around 28% Sims, and the line is equivalent. Sorry, there's an airplane taking off right now. If you hear that, not my fans making all the noise in the background. So the equivalent to his line is plus 284. So how I look at that is anything above 284 in the book, you're getting value. He's at plus 320 on FanDuel. It's a Dinger Tuesday. You're getting some good value there. And I think this is a good game. It's in Cincinnati, a homer-friendly ballpark. 2 pitchers who have been getting hit somewhat. Besides Weaver's last start, they've been getting hit pretty frequently. I think this is one of the good games to be on a homer prop.
Right.
Yeah, and Jazz also came in yesterday for a pinch hit appearance and hit a home run opposite field, which is pretty promising because that usually means it's pretty locked in and he's actually taking the ball the opposite way instead of trying to pull everything out. So that's that play passed both the eye test and the model test. That's what I'm getting at.
Right.
Yeah, just real quickly. So like the 0.28 is the average number of home runs he's hitting per sim. And it's roughly around 26% chance he's hitting a home run because there's multiple home run games, 3 home run games. And so usually what we do is we take the money line and we calculate the implied probability. So if we were starting with a number like 284, it'd be 100 divided by 384 as its percentage. In this case, a year ago, almost exactly, I did algebra in my office, and I think I still have it in my notes here, where I was able to do the formula the other way and code that in. I was very proud of myself because, I did first, something that I haven't done since I was 15 years old to come up with that number. And so, yeah, you're looking for a number that's bigger than that on your sports book.
Right. Yeah, so we talk about the Reds passing the model test and the eye test. Another team that you guys mentioned that also did the same thing was the Dodgers. We're looking at Dodgers money line minus 160. So that I have to assume you guys are pretty confident in that given that value.
Yeah, so another play we really like is the Dodgers, and shout out to the model yesterday for putting us all over the Dodgers at plus 120 against the Padres. I think we had like 15% of value, which is almost unheard of. And the Dodgers spotted them Padres 5 runs and still won easily. So great play there. And the model seems like it's liking the Dodgers again. And we agree with them. Brandon Pfaadt is starting. He's going to be very good for the D-backs someday. And he's actually shown signs of improvement. I believe he has 3 straight quality starts, but he's still a rookie. And the Dodgers lineup is just a different beast. Julio Urias has really struggled this season, mainly on the road, but he did pitch a quality start against the D-backs already this season. It was his first start of the season, though. The D-backs are 5-3 against the Dodgers this season, but all those games happened on April 10th or earlier. So there really wasn't any leverage in those games. The Dodgers didn't really have a reason to win. They didn't need to win those games, whereas now there's a playoff race and both teams need these wins. The Dodgers also have the 3rd best weighted on base average against righties since the All-Star break, while the Diamondbacks are ranked 25th in weighted on base average against lefties. The Dodgers also have a way better bullpen, ranked 6th in the league since the All-Star break, while the Diamondbacks are ranked dead last in bullpen ERA since the All-Star break. The Diamondbacks have given their new closer, Paul Sewald, just 1 9th-inning lead since acquiring him on August 1st, I believe it was. And the Twins walked him off before he could even record an out. So even if the Diamondbacks get it to their closer, it's not like it's a sure thing there. The Dodgers are also 14-8 since the All-Star break this season, and 9-4 on the road. Well, the Diamondbacks are 5-17 since the All-Star break and 2-4 at home. So clearly they haven't played many home games. Maybe they get it started at home, but I doubt they do it against the Dodgers. The D-backs have lost 6 straight. The Dodgers have won 7 of 10. And Will Smith should be in the lineup, which is big for the Dodgers because he got Sunday off. So I highly doubt they give him 2 off days in this span. So he should be there.
Cool. And then, Jake, I don't know if you had anything to say about that, but that's another.
Yeah. I mean, the Dodgers are never a bad bet, especially against a struggling team like the Diamondbacks. And Mookie Betts, he has 2 home runs his last 2 games. He's been on fire. He's up to 30 home runs on the season. Freddie's up to 340. His batting average. It's never wrong, like a bad idea to go with the Dodgers, especially if it's under minus 160. If you could line shop and get it right now, that's what I would do.
Yeah. Yeah, so we have another play that I know you guys are confident in, given the juice here too. We're talking about the Braves money line at the Pirates. Again, the great thing about this model is that obviously it comes up with its own answers, but then we have experts like John and Jake to also bring in their own opinion to either help upgrade or downgrade these plays based off what they think. So tell us why you're so confident.
I wouldn't do it either. That's why it came up.
Jake, you want to go?
Yeah, I like the Braves today. I think you can see the lines moving from minus 150 to minus 162. I'd get it out before it moves anymore. The Braves have lost 3 in a row, which is pretty rare. I don't expect that to get to 4. The Pirates, they got to Spencer Strider. 6 earned runs in 2 2/3 innings. I think the Braves are going to turn around and do that against Mitch Keller today. Mitch Keller has struggled recently. He was an all-star, but he's not pitching like an all-star right now. I just don't see the Braves losing 4 in a row. There's about 4% of value, so not enough for an A pick. But I still think if you get the Braves at this price against the Pirates, I think it's good, pretty good value.
Yeah, and so on the Braves, they've lost 3 in a row now. They didn't lose 3 in a row all last season until I believe it was either the second to last series or last series of the season where they weren't even playing their top guys. So this team does not lose a lot of games in a row. This season, this is a 3-game losing streak. I don't think that they've had a 4-game losing streak this season. I don't know if they even had a 3-game losing streak this season. So this is a team that rarely goes on a losing streak. I completely agree with Jake. I love the Braves there.
Yeah.
And no, I'm not at an internet cafe. I am stuck at the airport. There's been some bad weather here, so
for those just joining,
that's me directing the planes coming over here.
Yeah, so to go on that note about them rarely losing, like for the Braves, in the first 90 games of the season, they only lost 3 games, only twice. So that's once in every 45 games. So it is very rare for these guys to lose not only 3 games, but shoot, even more than that. So this is why, we like it. That's why the model likes it, because of that particular stat there.
Derek, do you know if they've lost 4 in a row? I don't think so, right?
I didn't see it.
Yeah.
I didn't see that in my research. That's why I had to bring it up about this 45 games in between it. And then they lost. So this time they lost. This is their 20th game after they lost the other 3. So it's a little bit more frequent now, but it's very rare because the first 90 games in the season, they only lost 3 games only 2 times. So
I have a quick question for Jake.
Yeah, go ahead.
Why does he think it's appropriate to go on vacation, not plan on coming back at least 2 days in advance of a new live show that we're trying to launch? And what's he going to do to make up for that? Is just out of curiosity.
My girlfriend this is her only break from school for the next 3 months, and so I
believe your girlfriend lives down here.
The math isn't
down here, so it's okay. That's I hope you're not about the Braves a little bit better than your
get out.
vacation.
You guys really get to see the inner workings of our group now.
Yeah. Remember seeing the actual request for time off. But I must have split my email. I must have been filtered to John.
Yeah. On a new note, so Jake doesn't have to keep getting flamed by Steven. Somebody was asking about the Cubs money line, which we did talk a lot about. There is a reason we downgraded that. John, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, so glad you asked. Cubs, the model actually has value on the Mets on the money line in this game. But as you guys see, Jake and I go through the plays every day, and they're given a grade, A, B, or C. If we don't like the grade, but the model has it, giving it value, then we'll just downgrade it. And that's what we did with the Mets here. So it wasn't a pick. We put it down to a B because we don't like it. I'm actually on the Cubs money line here. The Cubs had a terrible matchup yesterday. The Mets aren't going to lose every game the rest of the season. That's just not how baseball works. And the Cubs had very few relievers available yesterday. So even though they started all their top guys in the lineup, it was kind of a punt game in a sense because Drew Smyly, if he didn't get deep into the game, then the Cubs were kind of in a bad place anyway. But the Cubs should have everyone available in their bullpen again today after not pitching yesterday. The Cubs are also 16-8 since the All-Star break, including 5-2 on the road. The Cubs bullpen has also been slightly better than the Mets since the All-Star break, ranked 11th to the Mets ranked 19th. The Mets are also 9-13 since the All-Star break, but they're 7-4 at home. So they have been winning at home. They just haven't played at home in a while. The Carlos Carrasco is 1-3 with a 6.96 in his last 7 starts, and he's allowed at least 4 runs in 4 straight starts now. He's really struggled, and it doesn't really matter if he's home or away. He's kind of struggled just wherever he's gone. Jamison Tyone, on the other hand, has sneakily been pitching really well. He's 4-1 with a 3.57 in his last 7 starts, and he's been better on the road this season. The Cubs, I already said the Cubs bullpen, so we'll skip that one. But that's pretty much why we're on the Cubs money line today and why we don't like the value on the Mets.
Yeah, and we have another question. This is a good one, too. We talk more about the runs, Washington and Philly, both teams to score 2 or more runs at -118. Do we want to look into that game a little?
Yeah, so they're playing a doubleheader today. That is quite the thought. Scored multiple runs in both games. I'm assuming that's more of a weather and environment thought. I'm guessing the ball's flying in around Philly, Washington area, Jake, because it's so humid and hot there right now. It seems like it's storming. So I don't mind it. Both these teams are red hot and hitting as well. I wanted to play the Phillies Nationals over yesterday, but it was rained out, obviously. And the Nats have had their top 3 relievers pitch 3 days in a row. Obviously, they had yesterday off, but you rarely see a 4 and 5 day stretch. Usually those relievers get 2 days off in between that period, but it's a doubleheader as well. So I do think both teams should score a lot today, but be aware of the lineups because say the Phillies win the first game easily, they could rest a lot of players in the second game. And then it might just be better to go Nats on the money line.
Yeah, we have a lot of home run values in the second game with that. It's a tougher pitching matchup in the first game, especially with Zach Wheeler going, but then Josiah Gray and Ranger Suarez are pitching the second game. We like that matchup better for an over, but like John just said, you should wait and see the lineups come through because a lot of guys could be resting depending on if the Phillies win. If that game's low scoring and the Phillies lose, then I'd be all over like an over in the second game.
Yeah, that being said, you also can't, with that question, you can't wait to see the second or the first game's results if you're playing both.
No, I think it's separately. Yeah. I think it's both.
Oh, you mean in both games?
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I don't think it's.
Then that makes sense.
Yeah.
I was going to say that's how I would play it. Is just look at the first game and see if you can play that again the second game.
Yeah, right. I mean, I don't mind playing in both games really. I think there could be some runs scored, especially with this weather out here.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we have plenty of questions for you guys in the chat. So Jake and John will certainly be getting to all those as we move through the rest of the show. But before we do that, it is Dinger Tuesday. Jake, I know you were pretty passionate about another home run prop here.
Yeah, someone just put in the chat. Charles just put Yordan Alvarez, Matt Olson, Schwarber. I'm
go.
all over Yordan today at plus 300. I got that on FanDuel this morning. We've got at plus 199, so there's plenty of value there. I think that might be the best line of any player today, Yordan at plus 199. I just think it's a good matchup for him today. He hit a bomb yesterday. He's starting to heat up. He's starting to move past the injury he had. So Steven was mentioning before in our meeting that we haven't had a lot of success with our Dinger Tuesday plays, but all the players that we've been on have been having really good games. And so you might want to play over 1.5 hits, runs, and RBIs, which I played for Yordan, which he's hit that in a ton of games, or maybe an over 1.5 total bases at plus 130. John found that line. But this is his over 1.5 hits, runs, and RBIs. See, on the road, it's hit in 61 out of 100 games. So it's hitting at 61% of the time. It's minus 130. So you're still getting some pretty decent value there with that line.
And Jake, what were you saying about, you were saying this earlier about lefties versus righties in Camden Yards?
Oh, yeah. Camden Yards, they changed the dimensions. So it's a lot more lefty friendly than righty friendly now. And Yordan's going to pull the ball if he hits a bomb. So, and he's facing Grayson Rodriguez. Grayson's been a lot better since he's been called back up, but he's still a rookie. And Yordan Alvarez is one of the best hitters in the league. So that's a tough matchup for a rookie against Yordan, and plus 300. I think that's pretty good value.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, the chat is chatting with plenty of baseball picks. John and Jake, we're going to send them into the chat to answer all those questions. We will get to everything. We're going to move on to a new segment. I'd like to call it, we'll go with NFL optimistic overs is what we'll go with. But basically, we're going to hit all 32 teams. We're going to start with our 4 homer teams, Eagles, Ravens, Jags, and Browns. And we will see what it takes for these teams to hypothetically hit their over. Now, we have our own SportsLine baseline projection where we have them versus where the line is. And then we start to see what scenarios would take them from what we have them projected as to hit their over. And these are all possible. So we really dove in to see what it would take to get these teams going. So, Steven, we'll start with you. And John, we'll start with the Baltimore Ravens. Their line's set at 9.5. We have them at 9.8 wins, so not too far off. But you're looking at our baseline, point differential wins, what we think their chances to hit the division and to win the division and their chance to make the playoffs. And then you'll see how this increasingly gets better chances and they hit over that 9.5 through the scenarios.
Yeah, the odds are not. I've seen anywhere from 9.5 with heavy juice on the over, or 10.5 with slight juice on the under. So we're right in the middle there. So one brief explanation, and again, apologies because this is probably the part which people tune out, is the model tries to replicate the odds makers models, and then we try to look for when the shape of our curve, or like say where the average or median deviates from the betting line, and then we break that down. So we're really trying to do this from a refined systematic statistical approach. Whereas most handicappers and experts, when they make their picks, they focus on certain matchups and scenarios that they think are likely to happen. And if that happens, that's what they make a pick on. They don't necessarily do what we do, which is the line correct? They say, what's going to drive it to be a kind of a way on one side of the line or the other. So this is what we're doing. We're going to use the model, not just to show you if the line is correct, but then show you if what we think could happen happens, why you would bet the over. So even if our model doesn't have any value on any of the overs you're going to see, if you like what we're saying as far as the factors that could drive them over, then we could recommend the pick. So for the next slide, the thing about my Ravens,
Right.
The big thing is this. It was the red zone. I mean, obviously the Cincinnati playoff game, was most notable with Tyler Huntley fumbling on the one and getting one back for a touchdown. But for the last 2 years, Ravens fans have had a love-hate relationship with Tyler Huntley. We love the fact that between the 20s, he's actually nearly as productive as Lamar. He is 70% accuracy on his passing, sometimes on his short passes. He runs well. And so you can see in 2021, the number of drives in the red zone that we had actually went up in the weeks that Huntley got the bulk of the time. And last year, it only went down slightly. So we are basically not seeing the drop-off between Lamar and Huntley between the 20s. But in the red zone, 2 years ago, it was 67% scored a touchdown, down to 50, close to 50 with Huntley. And last year was really a debacle, with only around 50% with Lamar and a horrible 33%, without him. So overall for the season, we were like the 30th best team in touchdowns per red zone opportunity. So if Lamar is healthy, the model's saying the Ravens could go back to being at least middle of the pack, go from around 44% touchdowns per red zone opportunity to closer to 55%, which is what the league average is. And that would be enough. If we go back to the graphic, that would be enough to get solid over 10 points, 10 wins, and get us not a lock to the playoffs, but nearly 70%.
Right. So if we see the increased red zone efficiency, obviously we saw Todd Monken do it at Georgia. They had the #1 red zone efficiency. And then we talk about training camp and we're adding OBJ and Zay Flowers. Now it's hard to really quantify, training camp. Everyone's talk about success, but these guys have really proven that they can be weapons for Lamar.
Yeah. I mean, Zay Flowers' developing reputation is completely unstoppable in short yardage situations because of his quickness. And he's been scoring multiple touchdowns in red zone drills. And OBJ's actually had caught a couple of spectacular balls, had one-on-one against Marlon Humphrey. One other thing on Monken that I love is, so this is a scenario where we're going from bad in the red zone to average. But when Monken got to Georgia, they were 95th in scoring percentage in the red zone. And then he got there, they went to 27th, and then last year they were first. So if Monken's schemes gets us to top 5, then you see improvement of a full win. You'll go from like 9.8 wins to 10.8. And that's what Ravens fans are looking forward to.
Right.
The other dimension here is David Ajabo. He had a great 1 year at Michigan under Mike McDonald, our current defensive coordinator. And he was probably going to be the Ravens' first-round pick had he not torn his Achilles last year. And since Kyle Hamilton dropped as well. But Justin Houston was our led the team in sacks. And from 2 years ago to last year, Houston more than doubled his sack production, up 100%. And that was a driving force behind the team improving by 50% in that stat. So in our current projection, we have a Jabo around 6 sacks. And if he were to produce 12 plus sacks in the same number of snaps, same number of opportunities, doubles production the way Houston did, then you would see this significant bump in the Ravens' chances, and they'd start going over 75%, be one of the top 4 in chance of winning the Super Bowl. If you were to see his former high school teammate and former first-round pick Odafe Owe also match his production, and and as someone who's been burned by Owe before, after you saw it drop from year 1 to year 2, I'm not going to put that in writing, but and Ojabo played basically one game last year, and he got a strip sack on Burrow, so there's a little more optimism there. But if both of them actually were to break out as the Ravens hope, then you're talking about Baltimore getting to that favorite in the AFC North.
Right, and then
more than solid bet.
And you talk about playoffs, we already have them at 62% chance to make the playoffs, which not everybody agrees with. But with these two scenarios, they essentially become a playoff lock.
Yes. And the odds for Baltimore that I see for the playoffs is -160, which is 61.5%. We're right in line with Caesar's line at least.
Yeah, so at the end of last season, the Ravens were averaging opponents were averaging 22.8 points a game, and that is well off. That's about 4 points away from their season average of 18. So when you add in these two guys coming in and producing the way that we think that they should, then those points per game will go down, and then that's why they should have more success.
Yeah. Well, it's also Roquan. When the Ravens were allowed around 23. Yeah. And then Roquan came, we allowed under 16. So
right. So
I'm not banking on that. I'm not banking on but here's the thing, Ravens fans. If we are a top tier red zone team and we get from 25 points a game to 27, and we're the same defense we were last year with Roquan, then you're talking about plus 10 per game or more, which would lead the league in point differential, which is back to the 2019 Ravens regular season.
Right. Yeah, definitely Todd Monken is going to be a big part of these scenarios actually playing out. We'll move over to Derek's team, who also has a lot of heavy baseline assumptions, including the fact that Deshaun Watson is just back to who he was, and Chubb can still run the ball and be a workhorse, even though he's going into, I believe, his 6th season. So these are assumptions we do think will happen. We have them at 7.9 wins, which is way under the line of 9.5. So Derek, do you want to talk a little bit about why we have that?
Well, Steven's going to talk about the assumptions and the model.
So the assumption is he's back. He's not the really struggling quarterback that he was. It's more of a 24 touchdown projection and nearly a 2-to-1 TDI-INT ratio. So that's what we're defining as back in the baseline scenario. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, so we move into those scenarios of what can help this team. We have this scenario taking them from 7.9 wins to 8.9 wins, so almost 9 wins, which again includes Watson being back. But this specifically has to do with his wide receivers and what he can do with this core.
Yeah, so with these wide receivers that we have here, when you compare it to the Houston Texans, which was Brandon Cooks, which was really good at the time. It was really good in 2020. And then the other guys that are included in there was Kichi. The other wide receivers did not even remotely get close to 1,000 receiving yards. But when you add in for this year for Deshaun Watson, actually a whole year of being there as the quarterback, you have Amari Cooper, which has over 1,000 yards, 1,100 yards receptions, and then you have Donovan Peoples-Jones, which he had just under 900 receiving yards. So they added a very underrated by the national media with Elijah Moore from the Jets, which the Jets really wasn't using him as a slot receiver. So you add in those trio compared to what Deshaun Watson in his 70% on completion percentage back in 2020 with not really a very good receiving core, then he should have a better season on the lights of that 4,800 passing yards that he had back in 2020.
Right.
So you add that in with their defense. So the defense of the Browns last year as a zone defense was ranked 24th in the league in expected points against. But when they played in man, they were ranked 2nd. So that basically tells us that they should play more man defense than they did in zone. And this year with Jim Schwartz, they're going to play more man-to-man defense. So that should limit the amount of points being scored by the opposing teams. And then also with those man-to-man coverage, it will help out Myles Garrett and the new additions of Zadarius Smith and Tomlin as defense. Yeah, geez, just his name there. All right, so Thompson. So when you add those two, they should be able to get after the quarterback because of those lockdown corners and secondary that they have there. So that will increase the plus minus for them for points being scored. So that's where we get the additional wins.
In the model, if you want to pop my screen on for a second, you can. Yeah. So when I was in the process of figuring out some things that will really move the needle, I just look at the different, obviously the offseason moves, the draft picks, but I started with the data you're seeing in front of you, which is looking at some major stat categories and what I see as strengths and weaknesses. And everyone knows how great Myles Garrett is, and as an AFC North competitor, I'm terrified of the guy. But then when I saw that their sack production was just 2 a game, down from 2.5 a year ago, it's almost like, how is that possible with Myles Garrett there being one of the top 3 in the league? And so, but then you notice their pass defense is actually very good in terms of yardage allowed and passer rating allowed. They're top 10, I believe. So the thing about Cleveland is if you can get both, and with Zadarius Smith, who had double-digit sacks with Minnesota in his 1 year there.
Right.
The second leading sacker, Cleveland last year had 3. So now you're adding potentially elite pass rusher to go with Myles Garrett. And if they can, then that could be the trigger that gets Cleveland to that top 5 pass defense and, clear top 10 overall.
Right. And if you look over at the playoff percentage, 25% chance to make the playoffs over to 63%. That's almost a 38% jump. And these are probable things that could happen. Absolutely. This pass rush improving and this wide receiver core improving. Someone in the chat was asking about the overall ceiling for the Browns. If you guys want to talk about that.
I think this is the ceiling in the division, given how competitive the AFC North is. Mm-hmm. To every fan base and the AFC overall. The ceiling here being they are just up there with, they're essentially a 3-way tie with Baltimore and Cincinnati to win the division if they're at 34%.
Right.
So the difference, like last year, the difference between last year and this year is the strength of schedule. So like the strength of schedule last year for the Browns was like top 5 because of the division that they were in and the opponents they were going against in other divisions. Now this year is lower because, well, they finished last in the division last year. And then when you add in the fact that this year they're not going to go against as many elite teams. So then that's where you can get more wins than what's expected.
Right. And someone else was asking, Rebecca was asking about NFL changing the XFL kickoff procedure, which there's always going to be rumors of. How do you think this impacts our model specifically and just what the odds makers think too?
That's one of those things where we have to look into it. Like, it's hard to say, like, did XFL, did it seem to, I believe that the rule is you don't allow people to start running the coverage team until the ball is caught.
But then there's another one where I know that they're trying it out in preseason, which is the fair catch. That's behind the 20-yard line. So if they get a fair catch, then the ball starts automatically at the 25-yard line. So if that happens, that could take away the, people returning the ball.
I don't think it's going to change totals at all. Like if a team averages 4.5 scoring drives, and with halftime and everything else, you might get, let's say, 5 return opportunities. And we already know at this point, 80% of those things aren't being returned anyway, and this might go from 80 to 90%, depending on what happens. Right. It's just not a big enough play. The number of people it's not like when, 10 years ago, 15 years, 20 years ago, where you had the Devin Hesters of the world and you had people who are really moving lines with their spectacular return play. As the league has legislated the play out for safety reasons, it's just not enough events that were even a 10% increase or decrease in returns is going to have it, especially when considered the average return pretty much gets you under 25 anyway. So it's not enough of an impact.
Yeah. And believe me, if there is, we will be all over it without a doubt. We're going to move on to my team, the Philadelphia Eagles, line set at 11.5. We have them at 11.3 wins. So just around that number. And the basic assumptions we're going with here, the offensive coordinator is gone. Obviously, we don't really think it matters that much. You have Jalen Hurts is the kind of player, if he even sees a little bit of regression, he's at that level where it's really not that big of a deal. I mean, technically, Patrick Mahomes showed regression last year, if that puts it into perspective. But you have Brian Johnson, who's been around Hurts for a while. He knows his family. He's been around for a lot of his life. So it just doesn't seem like it's going to be this big deal that Steichen's gone. And then you have defensive coordinator gone, and you hope that that Bulldog impact, all these new players coming in and replacing the guys we lost, should show an impact. Jonathan Gannon obviously got some heat after the Super Bowl, especially from the city of Philadelphia. And then you have all the Cardinals drama. Whatever it is what it is. But Sean Desai will have a pretty similar scheme. Not too much should change, I don't think. Maybe more pressure. Maybe he goes for more than 4 rushers. You have Nolan Smith now, another Bulldog. So you have that capability. So that's really the only difference we would really see. But scenarios to take them over that 11.5-point line, this takes them to what we think is 11.9, is this new running back roster depth that we have. You know, you lose Pro Bowler Sanders, but now you have Rashad Penny and DeAndre Swift. Do I think DeAndre Swift alone is enough to move the needle to change the complexity of this offense? No, but him with Penny is just an upgrade from Sanders. You have Swift, who could certainly help in the pass catching game, something that the Eagles haven't seen from their running backs recently. I just think they're a way more impactful duo than they have with Sanders.
Yeah, I have some numbers. If you want simple numbers, that, you know, simple math is Penny, if he stays healthy, which is a huge if, you know, is a much more dynamic runner per carry than Sanders is. This is the last 2 years combined. Problem is he only played 15 games. And Swift is obviously one of the top receiving backs, where Sanders is almost has no role, and and the team had no faith in that. Then Sanders down the stretch was the most troubling thing. You know, Pro Bowls are decided by week 11, week 12, right? But from after that, down the stretch of the regular season, and when it counted most in the playoffs, with the exception of, he got 2 touchdowns against San Francisco after, Brock Purdy got hurt and everything else fell off the wheel. And he had a good game against the Giants, but even with those 2 highlights, these were his per game averages, well under 4 yards a carry, barely, not much touchdown reduction, negative yards. So, it's just like in our model, we're just swapping out players. We look at how productive they are, not only how productive they are individually, but taking into account to how they compare to other players on that team and other defenses they played. So if you were fortunate enough to rack up huge numbers on an offense where the other backs were getting similar per carry, then you're not necessarily rewarded. But if you're like, say, Tony Pollard in Dallas, where he would average 1.5 more yards per carry than Zeke in many of the same overlapping situations, and you're giving credit for that. So we're not just, so it's not, I figured that out in 2006 or whatever, when I got burned because I had Clint Portis leading the league in rushing when he went from Denver to Washington. And without playing in front of that running game of Denver, he went from like 5.5 yards a carry to like 3.5 going to Washington. But he did have like an 80-yard touchdown on his very first carry, which felt good. So for fantasy, just a side note, we think Sanders is overrated. We have him as 25th in PPR, 22 in standard, lower than the experts. We have Swift and Swift, typo. Swift and Penny as slightly underrated based on fantasy. Sorry.
Right.
Yeah. So another thing, a reason why the backfield has gotten better from the Philadelphia is the yards after contact. Miles Sanders was not taking the ball, having a lot of rush attempts inside the 20-yard line. But now they add in Penny, which gets 3.1 yards per attempt, after yards after contact. But with Miles Sanders and then also with Swift, they only have 1.7 yards per carry after contact. So you have Penny now, that can be one of the guys that can actually get the ball into the end zone, which would in turn score more points. And so that would give, the over with the amount of wins that they have for the season.
Right. Yeah. And then this is all we're taking these scenarios as hypothetical of
Right.
what it would take for these teams to hit their over. So obviously this is all implied that Penny is healthy and that everyone is healthy. But the great thing for the Eagles right now is they have 5 solid running backs. So they have that depth chart in case people do get injured. But we talk about the other side of the ball. Not many problems with the Eagles defense last year, but you did see a vulnerability in their run defense come the playoffs, especially in the Super Bowl. So if they can keep this top 3 pass rush that they already have, and then they can, improve on their run defense and be, a top team in both categories, that certainly takes them over the edge, over to 12 wins. You have Jordan Davis now has Jalen Carter, another Bulldog. They're reunited. So if there's a scenario where, the Eagles can really improve on this run defense, they will be really, really dangerous all over.
Yeah, if you want to hop over for the screen for 1 second, I just thought it was jarring to see. They clearly had a strategic decision to go because they averaged under 2 sacks a game 2 years ago.
Right.
And they went from that to an all-time high. So they went from 1.8 sack per game average to 4.6 in 1 year. But they clearly decided, and probably for good reasons, to sacrifice the sheer run defense, yards per carry. So they went from allowing 4.0 to allowing 4.8, and which was great for their regular season. But then, when push came to shove, some of the playoff games, they showed some vulnerability even against Kansas City, a team that's not known for their running ability, right?
Right.
So that's the idea that if you can get this 4.0 to go along with that 4.6, then you're in real business.
Right. Yeah. And that becomes, a dangerous duo. So that takes their Super Bowl odds to almost 29%, which in theory is actually pretty good odds, over 11.5 wins. I feel pretty confident that they'll hit that 11 wins, but they do have to play, their schedule's a gauntlet this year, and they play San Francisco and they play Dallas, who have great run offenses. So this is when the run defense really is going to have to show up. And if they can figure that out, then I think they have a pretty good chance of hitting those 12 wins.
And then they signed Miles Jack, and that will assist them with depth at their linebacker position. So he was ranked 30th in the league last year in assists for tackles. So you have another guy that can actually help out, get the guys down in the run, the run defense.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And Zach Cunningham, he led the league in tackles a few years back.
Right. And Big Cheesy's asking about the Niners. Just to let everyone know, we will be getting to all 32 NFL teams, so you will just have to tune in to next week. But right now, we are going to head over to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Jake, this is his team. We're going to let him take the wheel here. But Steven, tell us about these assumptions we have for him right now.
Trevor Lawrence will continue his ascent as he's already pretty damn good. But with Calvin Ridley back from his suspension, the schedule, even though it's technically a first place schedule for winning the division, it's still soft given their division, and they play the NFC South to go along with that. Defense is trending in the right direction, but maybe not as much as Jake likes to think.
Right.
But the first scenario. So I presented this with Jake. I think. No, you got this.
Yeah. So I got a Duval. The first scenario is Trayvon Walker has noticeably gotten better in the second year. He actually had 2 sacks in his last practice, which I noticed. He's not one of these guys who's going to win a lot of one-on-ones. He's another one of those Georgia defenders. He's an athletic freak, but what I've been hearing is he's ready to take on that next step. A rookie year. He was also only in the college for 3 years. He was a young player. He's 20 years old when he got drafted. He's going to be like 22 now. So this is the year where he's going to step up. I think even if he just improves a little, that could do a lot for this defense. Josh Allen is in his 5th year. He's going to be on a prove-it year if he wants to get the tag or he wants to get extended. If Trayvon Walker improves like Khalil Mack did in year 2, that moves their wins from 9.8 to 10.6, and the Jaguars went from 68.5% of the playoffs to 80.8%.
Right. Yeah, and then we talk about Trevor Lawrence here. This scenario is Trevor Lawrence really just becoming that guy, which is not impossible, as Steven really likes to think. He puts him only second behind Patrick Mahomes. So, Steven, if you want to break that one down for us.
Yeah, I mean, everyone knew Trevor Lawrence coming out of high school. Obviously, he's basically the best prospect ever. And I just remember him running a ton, especially some spectacular runs in college. And it didn't seem like in the NFL. I have a table here that looking at. He's not one of the anywhere near the leading scramblers as a quarterback. And it seemed like and Jake likes to point out is he had a bad concussion his sophomore year. So his sophomore year in college, he averaged almost 40 yards a carry, 40 yards a game. And that's with the college rules where sacks count against your rushing totals and things. So and then it dropped by almost half for his junior season. But if you look at in the NFL, 44% of his scrambles result in first downs, which is second on this list to just Daniel Jones. And it's more than well over double what their respective running backs do in those areas. So he only averages 1.6 first downs running the ball per game. But he has the speed and the size and the traits to certainly be in this Josh Allen, Daniel Jones, even a little bit of Jalen Hurts class in terms of conversion, first down rate, and yards per carry, and overall 40-yard dashed speed.
Right.
So I think Lawrence, with a few more designed runs to keep the defense more honest, along with being willing to scramble for those first downs, and getting to that 6 carry per game level and the 35-yard level would result in 2.5 more first downs a game, would result in 1 more or maybe 1.7 more scoring drives per game, which is around 3 more points a game, and you add 3 more points. If you look at any team with a 50 point differential for the season, they're probably at 10, 11 wins. So it's a huge difference, just getting that 1 more scoring drive. You have 12 drives a game, 13 drives a game.
Right.
I wanted to emulate what Patrick Mahomes does from regular season to playoffs. Proves the point. When the competition is at its toughest, and you're not worried about your health necessarily, his run attempts increases, his yardage goes way up per game, and this includes last year where he didn't run as much as he would have had he had not that serious leg injury. So basically, the key for Lawrence is to be like Mahomes, run when it counts, run more. Be in this. Daniel Jones got $43 million a year just because he could run. Josh Allen, Hurts, that's the level I think that he should strive for.
Yeah, and he has this, running ability, but he also now has Calvin Ridley with him, which is another big scenario for him. Someone was asking about, Scott Tyler was asking about if he could be a top 5 wide receiver this year. Do you think Lawrence can get there?
Yeah, so there's a clip that went viral a couple of weeks ago, and when Calvin Ridley made his return, it was Zay Jones running a route and then Calvin Ridley running a route, and Calvin Ridley looked twice as fast as Zay Jones, and Zay Jones had 800 yards for the Jaguars, and I think this goes along with Trevor getting more rushing abilities because teams are going to have to focus more on these weapons like Calvin Ridley, Zay Jones, Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram. In Trevor's first year, he didn't have these kind of weapons, and now he does. And I think the offensive line, it's not getting a lot of love, but I think it's going to be a lot better this year. And it has a lot to do with how Cam Robinson does when he returns from a suspension, and Walker Little's been getting a lot of praise this offseason. So I think all these weapons, like Calvin Ridley, I think he looks like he could return to form and be a top 5 fantasy wide receiver. I think that's a little high. In front of me.
If you want to share my screen for a second.
Yeah.
We have Ridley in PPR and over a non-PPR at 19th, which is a little worse than the Fantasy Football Today experts at 15th. But again, it all comes down to, in fantasy, you end up being in competition with your own team, right, for targets and whatnot. And so Kirk is still supposed to be wide receiver 25. Ingram, top 10 tight end. It comes down to Zay Jones. And if he is a pretty big target, with getting 58 catches and 600 plus yards, if they go really just 2 wide receivers and they're just like feeding Ridley, and not, and Zay's getting far fewer targets, and this 58 is more like 38, and this 605 is more like 405, and that all goes right here, then yeah, you have the top 5 wide receivers. So it's more like, I don't know the ins and outs of Jaguars offense, and I'm not following the training camps closely, but if there's an indicator that you think that it's Zay is going to be a significant drop off, we go by the percentages that they accumulate. We don't try to inject, I certainly don't try to inject too much of my own opinion as far as generally what the model does in this case. But if your reports are that Zay is odd man out and Ridley is the man, then yeah, that he could be definitely a top 5. The reason why I don't think he's odd man out, because my memory of Zay Jones is his game against Baltimore when he had 11 catches for 145 yards. So maybe that's just my bias.
Yeah.
Now with the head coach. With the head coach, just to try and help you out there, Steven. So with the head coach of the Jaguars is Doug Peterson. So his first year with the Eagles, their passing yards was ranked 24th. Then in the second season, they were ranked in number 13. So that was about 1,000 yards that he had in between those two rankings. So when you add those in with the amount of opportunities that they're going to have in the second year, there's going to be a possibility of this happening, having more yards to distribute to other players.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily Zay Jones is going to drop off. I just think that Trevor throws for more yards. They throw it more often. And Calvin Ridley could get to 1,200 yards. Zay Jones maybe drops off from 800 to 650, but he's making $8 million per year. It's not a crazy contract. I think they still really like him inside that clubhouse.
Right.
Yeah, the target, that whole, the additions, I like for fantasy in general, I looked at who's been added to the team and subtracted. I know we're running out of time, but I put something together, last minute, and I want to be able to use it. So we got to go through this number.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we could have teased it too.
For purely selfish
Let me
reasons.
give you
Yeah.
my thoughts here, okay, there's been a lot of controversy about Mark Andrews versus TJ Hockenson and who you should take in fantasy first. And we have, our model says stuff that most people aren't thinking. There you go, Steven.
I don't think it's controversial, but whenever my boss writes me a Slack at late night and says he's surprised, then it becomes controversial. So I don't bite the hand that feeds me and respond very quickly to people I care about. No offense. Right. So in this case, we actually have Hockenson and Andrews basically as 2 and 3, and it's not a controversy in my mind because the Fantasy Football Today experts have it reversed, 3 and 2. But so these are just projected stats. I'm not going to go too much detail here. The reasons I personally love Mark Andrews, but I would draft TJ Hockenson for 2 main reasons. Just pure passing numbers. I think Lamar can pass for 6,000 yards, like you said, but we're not projecting that. We're projecting, a nearly 1,000-yard advantage for Cousins and 1 more touchdown. So just the pie is larger in Minnesota. But the biggest problem for Andrew's upside is his piece of the pie. Baltimore now has 4 former first-round picks at wide receiver, and versus last year's team, which had our leading, Andrews, Isaiah Likely, and a wide receiver whose name I'm blanking on. So we added OBJ, who accounts for roughly around 15% of his team's catches. Zay Flowers, based on projections, ours, Fantasy Football Today guys, around 15%. Aguilar around 11%. And Rashad Bateman, I put him on this list because he missed most of last season, and he's at 14%. So the Andrews who had 5 catches a game last year is now going to be dealing. The wide receiver crew has increased the percentage of receptions over 50% of the team. The only subtractions we have in terms of targets is Josh Oliver, who actually went to Minnesota. And I'm putting Pat Ricard here because he's a fullback in Greg Roman's scheme, actually getting targets. But in Monken's scheme, he's not getting anything, and he's actually training with the offensive line right now. So that combined with the fact that the Roman offense with multiple tight end sets, he would play 2 to 3 tight ends at a time routinely. That's probably gone. Isaiah Likely is an emerging tight end, receiving tight end. The guy we drafted ahead of him in the same round at tight end was Charlie Kolar, who missed all last year with injury. He's playing. He's transformed his body to be a better blocker. And we're actually going to do check down passes to running backs, something that Roman literally never did. He would answer reporters' questions with Lamar running's our check down. Jonathan passed it off. So just the sets are not going to be favorable for increased targets for Andrews and all the share. And even subtle things where Andrews is not going as nuts physically because in order to preserve his body for the full season, this is based on George Kittle's advice. So there could be some concerns about whether they would rest him and err on the side of caution if things are going well at the receiver position in terms of health. Whereas Hockenson's pretty much got the same situation he had last year, where he was a beast getting, how many catches in his first game with Minnesota? Derek?
So Hockenson in his first game, he had 9 receptions.
Yeah,
in his first game, and only had 1 practice.
And unfortunately, he also ended the season with that, that ridiculous, dump off when they needed a first down, and he.
Let's not look at that there, Steven. But that's
a good sign that he went to Hockenson when they needed 10 or 15 and they got 4. Anyway, in Hockenson, they've added Oliver, who came into the league as a hot prospect as a receiving tight end, was out of the league, came back with Baltimore and revived his career as a blocking tight end. So that's where they got him. They added Jordan Addison, who, based on projections of wide receiver 32-ish, would be around 16% of the team's reception. So they added 23, but then Adam Thielen's gone, and he was at 17%. So really, pretty much the same team in terms of target share for Tom Hockenson. Dalvin Cook's gone, and he was a pretty big target as a receiver out of the backfield. Madison will likely increase from his virtually nothing now that he's a starter, but he's not going to become Christian McCaffrey or something, So I think that Hockenson's floor is much higher than Andrews' floor, just on sheer. The only way that you would think Andrews is a better bet is, and we can only hope this happens, is at this number, 25 points per game. We're projecting the exact number of points per game for Minnesota and Baltimore. If you're like me and a Ravens fan, you think Monken's going to transform us and we're going to go back to 30 points a game, and that's like nearly one more touchdown a game, then all of a sudden that Andrews, touchdown number goes from 6 to 8, then you consider it if you're an optimist. But then if you consider, I think that's going to happen, then you should bet definitely the Ravens to win the Super Bowl, because we're going to, again, have a plus 13-point differential and be such a dominant team that, it's going to be glorious.
Way to full circle the Homer episode. That really brings us back to the beginning here. Well, that is really all we have time for today. We love all the questions in the chat. We appreciate them, and we will be hitting all 32 teams. So Big Cheesy, we'll get to the Saints, we'll get to Josh Allen. They're all coming. You guys comment on our Twitters what you want to hear, even some fantasy situations and scenarios. We're here to answer it all. We will see you next Tuesday with 4 more teams, and bring your questions. Thanks, guys.